Hello, hello, hello. All right, we have read chapters 1, 2, and 3 of What Color Is My World? The Lost History of African American Inventors by the one and only Kareem Abdul Jabbar. And we've been learning about so many amazing inventors that honestly, before reading this book, I didn't even know about. And I studied Black history in college. I didn't even know about a lot of these people. We have been making our bridge maps, and we made one for chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, and we learned about some amazing people like Dr. Henry T. Sampson, who invented the Gamma electric cell, Granville T. Woods, who invented the induction telegraph. He was a big part of why we have cell phones today, because induction telegraphs allowed two trains to communicate to each other. Let's say one train is in Albany, another one's in Schenectady, they could talk to each other. And this was way before cell phones were a thing, so it was huge. Louis Latimer, my main man, invented a carbon filament in light bulbs so that light bulbs work and they are efficient and we can use them day to day. Dr. Mark Dean, who invented home and office computers so we can use them at home. Dr. Valerie L. Thomas, who invented 3D or innovated 3D imaging. James E. West, who invented a compact microphone that allows me to record these videos for you guys. Joseph Lee, who invented the bread making machine. Lloyd A. Hall, who innovated food preservation so that we can store food more easily and keep it for a longer amount of time. And then Mr. George Crumb, who we can all thank for the amazing potato chip. Now, before we get into chapters 4 and 5, we did mention one person in chapter 3 who helped us all get the grocery stores that we have today. He was a big part of that, and we never really talked about what he did. So we mentioned someone named Fred Jones. He was someone who Mr. Mattal had thanked for the grocery stores we have today. And I'm going to actually show you the new bridge map we're going to make. I don't know why you're leaning so much today. I'm going to show you the new bridge map that we're going to make, and I actually started him off on this bridge map. So this is going to be for chapter 4, and then after we're done reading chapter 4, I'll fill in everything we need to for 4 and fill in the inventors for chapter 5. But if you look here, we have Fred Jones. He was one of the inventors we learned about in chapter 3, and he invented the portable refrigeration unit, which all the trucks actually, the trucks that go to grocery stores that bring you guys food, and you can go to Save-A-Lot, you can go to Walmart, you can go to Price Chopper, all of that. Thank him. Without his invention, we would only rely on farms to get food, because that'd be the only way you can really get fresh food. Because of him, we're able to get food from all over the country. That's why sometimes your oranges will come from Florida. Sometimes you may have corn that comes from the Midwest, those kinds of things. So thank him for having food in our grocery stores that come from all over. And for chapter 4, we're going to be learning about 3 different gentlemen. Dr. Percy Julian, Dr. Charles Drew, and Dr. Daniel Hale. Keep these friends in mind. And I hope you're really growing a new appreciation for all the everyday objects around you. Really take some time. Every time we learn about a new inventor, go around and, take another thought and say, wow, everything around me, someone had to invent. I know you were born with, things just kind of existing, and you thought, oh, this was just how everything was. Everything that's not just growing natural in nature, everything, honestly, even some vegetables and things that we eat were invented as well. But most things around us had to be created by someone. So really keep that in mind. Take some time to appreciate that, because without all these amazing people, which again, people to this day try to pretend that these important, amazing people didn't exist. And there were definitely some other non-Black inventors that did amazing things that helped us get what we have today. I'm not saying that it's just African American inventors, but I want you to really think about what these people had to go through to even be able to invent what they did. Because remember, for centuries, meaning for hundreds and hundreds of years, if you were of African descent, meaning somewhere down the line your family came from Africa, the world kind of saw less of you, or they saw you as less than, because they saw how rich Africa is. Africa is the richest continent in the world. They saw how hard people worked, how healthy people were there. Africa didn't really get too many diseases. We did really well with growing crops and things like that. Our civilizations were really, really strong, and people started to envy that. So they started telling their kids, who told their kids that, hey, we need to dislike African people, and we need to basically make them work for us because that's what they're good for. And that was just the lie that was passed down generation to generation to generation for hundreds of years. So these people had to work really hard to even get the opportunity to learn about certain things in order to invent certain things. So we have the life we have today. So I just want you to take some time, really appreciate everyone we're learning about in this book. Because if any of these one people did not exist or do the work they did, we wouldn't have the life we have today. And I'm so appreciative of that. That's why this is one of my favorite books. So we're going to get right into chapter 4. I'm very curious to see what Mr. Mattal has up his sleeve because, as we know, he's been a little fishy recently. Okay, chapter 4. If you bump me one more time, I'll drown you in the toilet, Ella warned. Then move your big butt over and give me some room, I said. What did you say about my butt? She spun around and pointed a disinfectant spray bottle at me. I pointed my Windex bottle at her. We stared at each other like a couple gunslingers. All we needed was a tumbleweed to whirl by. And given the messy condition of this bathroom, I wouldn't be surprised if one did. How's it going in there? Mr. Mattal said, poking his head in the doorway. We both jumped. I was starting to think that Ella's suggestion of attaching a bell to him was a good idea. There's plenty of mold, Ella said. Maybe you got a story about some black inventor who beat Louis Pasteur to discovering penicillin? Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in 1928, I said. He was Scottish, and he won the Nobel Prize. Very good, Herbie, Mr. Mattal said. Ella stuck her tongue out at me. I think she's jealous. But just like with everything else, he stood on the shoulders of the people who came before him. John Tynell makes reference to the same process in 1875. And in 1897, French physician Ernest Duchens noticed that Arab stable boys deliberately kept their saddles in a damp, dark room to allow mold to grow on them. When he asked them why, they said that the mold healed the saddle sores on horses. Unfortunately for Dr. Duchens, when he submitted those findings in a paper, he was rejected because he was only 23 years old, which is basically this inventor, Ernest Duchens, had an idea for penicillin, which is what people take now when they get sick with infections. But he wasn't able to have it patented, or people weren't listening to his ideas basically because he was only 23, which, even though I know for you guys, oh my gosh, 23 is so old, it was actually pretty young. And it still, in a sense, is pretty young for someone to have innovative ideas like this. They rejected him because he was too young, Ella protested. Thousands of lives could have been saved. Happens all the time. You're too young, you're too foreign, you're too black, you're too female, and we all pay for it. Ella sighed. Yeah, well, maybe when we're done cleaning toilets, we can learn more about that history. You can learn it right here, Mr. Mattal said. He opened the medicine cabinet. It's empty, I said. True, there's nothing in it right now, but it's packed to overflowing with history, with the people who dedicated their lives to relieving the sufferings of others. Let me reread that sentence again. With the people who dedicated their lives to relieving the sufferings of others. I thought back to my history classes, trying to come up with the names of African American and scientists he might mention. Herbie's really paying attention. He's really trying to use his schema or his background knowledge to help him with this conversation with Mr. Mattal. I think that's a really, really good strategy to use. Ever heard of cortisone? Mr. Mattal asked. Yeah, Ella said. Grandma takes it for her arthritis, and Auntie Shannara takes it for allergies. And a lot of professional athletes get cortisone injections when they're injured, I added. They can all thank a black man, Dr. Percy Julian. He's right over here. For easing their pain. Also, the 14 million people who get blood transfusions every year can thank a black doctor named Charles Drew. The 700,000 Americans who have open heart surgery every year owe their lives in part to Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, who was a black doctor in Chicago and an early pioneer in the procedure. He stuck his hand into the empty medicine cabinet. So you see, the cabinet isn't empty at all. If you know what to look for. Kind of like a doctor examining a patient, Ella said. Mr. Martel's smile widened. Exactly right. I made a kissing face at Ella, but she was too pleased with herself to notice. What makes their accomplishments all the more remarkable is that they did it at a time when it was hard for a black scientist to be taken seriously. They had everything going against them, and they still kept trying. I sat on the edge of the tub and opened my journal. Okay. We're going to get right into chapter 5 in a moment, but I'm going to take a pause, take some notes, and I'll show them to you when I'm done. Hello. Okay, so I took some notes on all of the inventors that we talked about, all the African American inventors. Now, we did talk about some European inventors, and I want to write them down eventually, but I can't write them down on this specific bridge map, simply because this bridge map is specifically meant to emphasize African American inventors. If you remember down here when we said the relating factor, meaning how all of the people on top line kind of relate, is that they're an African American inventor of the thing that is underneath them. Now, if I just said is an inventor of, then absolutely I can go ahead and put down some of the non-African American inventors that we learned about. However, because we're specifically taking notes on African American inventors, I have to simply write down the African American inventors, just because that's how I set up my own map. And if I ever go back to it later on, I need to make sure I understand the information I wrote down. Because if I have a non-African American inventor just written on here, but later on I see in the bottom that my relating factor is that this person's an African American inventor of this, but they're not an African American inventor, that might mess me up in my future work. So I'm going to leave this guy up here. And we talked about Dr. Percy Julian, who invented cortisone or pain relieving medicine. Dr. Charles Drew, who innovated blood banks and really popularized them. He was fired for doing that, by the way. It was insane. And then Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. I apologize, I didn't write his last name down before. But he innovated the open heart surgery, which saved many, many, many lives. And I'm actually going to probably come back later and read you some of the biographies of these people because it's insane. For example, there were people in Dr. Perry Julian's family who worked so hard to get an education, to inspire him to get an education, that his grandfather actually was a slave and ended up getting his fingers cut off, some of his fingers, about 2, because he decided to learn how to read. Now imagine you guys go to school every single day for free. Now I know we're home right now, but still you have the opportunity to learn every single day for free. And we encourage you to learn. His grandfather wanted to learn, but couldn't, and then got in trouble because he just wanted to get an education. If that doesn't make you appreciate education, there's nothing else I can give you. I'm going to be honest with you. There's nothing else I can do for you. All right. So I'm going to assume you went back, you paused any part of that little section that you needed to in order to take your notes. And then we're going to get right into chapter 5. Now, I'm going to actually write down all the inventors for chapter 5. All right, so I've written down the inventors for chapter 5. Now, 2 of them will be mentioned in the text. 2 of them will be kind of referenced, but we won't learn directly about them through the text. I'll have to explain it after we're done reading. But the 2 inventors we will guarantee hear about in the text is Garrett Morgan and John Lee Love. 2 that will be kind of mentioned in a bit, but we won't really learn about them, will be Alfred L. Crail and Lonnie Johnson. So let's get right into this. I really, really like this chapter. It's a very sweet chapter to me, but it's kind of like chapter 3. It makes me a little bit hungry. Okay, chapter 5. "You got a serious case of the bad finger boogie," Ella said, pointing at my hand. I was shaking out the numbness from writing so much in my journal. "Too easy," I said. "Bad finger boogie is the original title of With a Little Help from My Friends. They call it that because John Lennon had to use his middle finger when playing the piano due to an injury of his forefinger." Ella shook her head. "You know, this game would be a lot more fun if you didn't always sound like a textbook." "Don't challenge me to Beatles trivia if you can't handle getting whooped." Ella laughed. "Oh, it's on now, loser." "Aha! Ringo said that in the movie, A Hard Day's Night, when they ask him if he's a mod or a rockster, a rocker." Ella stuck her tongue out at me and laughed again. Then she did a little victory dance. Something had definitely changed in her. I could tell she was sort of enjoying herself. Plus, Ella had been writing a lot too. It was nice to see her interested in something for a change, even though she'd never let on that she cared. I could see a light in her eye when she wrote, and if she was seeing possibilities in her own life she'd never considered before. A bell jangled. We turned to see Mr. Mattal, who was holding a small bicycle bell, the kind on little kid bikes. "You wanted some warnings. I figured this would do the trick." Ella smiled. "Yeah, that'll do." "Well, Mr. Mattal," I said, "it looks like we're about done here. Thank you for all your help with the house and the history lessons. History lessons are all around you. Pick up any simple object and ask yourself, how did this get here? And suddenly you're transported to other times. Like those traffic lights out there. Garrett Morgan once witnessed a terrible accident and asked himself, what if I made something to stop such tragedies? So he created a type of traffic signal, and it saved lots of lives. Not the first one, not the one we use today, but one that saved many lives. Garrett Morgan also once ran into a poisonous mine to rescue trapped workers wearing a safety hood he'd invented for firefighters. I don't think I could do something like that, I said. I expected some sarcastic comment from Ella, but all she said was a quiet, me neither. What all these inventors and innovators have in common, Mr. Mattal said, is that they wanted to improve people's lives. That would be an engineer, someone who works to solve problems. I think especially for African Americans coming out of those harsh times when most of their people suffered repression and discrimination, they were inspired to alleviate some of that suffering. Sometimes in big ways, but sometimes in little ways. Mr. Mattal reached into his pocket, pulled out a small pencil sharpener, and tossed it to me. A black man named John Lee Love invented this. Didn't save any lives that I know of, but it sure changed the world we know. I caught the sharpener and quickly sharpened my pencil so I could write in my journal. Ella leaned forward and said, "What else do you see?" Mrs. Mattal waved his arms around. "There's so much. Everything from those shoes you're walking on, you're wearing to the mailbox outside. Everything from those shoes you're wearing to the mailbox outside, to the ice cream scoop in the kitchen, to the super soaker squirt gun, all invented and innovated by Black men and women." "Can you tell us about them?" I asked. "Which ones?" "All of them." Mr. Mattal looked at his watch. "Well," he walked over to the closet and started rooting around inside. His voice was muffled a little as he spoke. "I suppose I can stay a little longer. But first, isn't there a Beatles song about a hole in the roof?" "Fixing a hole," Ella and I said at the same time. "Jinx," she said, "you owe me a Coke." "And what happens if you don't fix that roof in the... And what happens if you don't fix that hole in the roof?" he asked from inside the closet. We could hear clattering as he moved around in there. "Rain gets in?" Ella said with a shrug. "Exactly," Mr. Mattal said. Suddenly, he jumped out the closet, holding an enormous super soaker squirt gun. "And when it rains, it pours," he said, grinning. And he started firing. In an instant, we were soaked. Okay, give me one moment to take some notes, and I'll share them with you in a bit. All right, I'm back. I told you, every single time I read some of these chapters, I get really hungry. First, learned about George Crumb. And what did I want? Chips. And then, learned about brain freeze, sorry. Alfred L. Crail. And now what do I want? Ice cream. Why? He invented the ice cream scoop. And yes, if you're wondering, I am using the ice cream scoop as a spoon and trying to be environmentally friendly. You know, 2 birds, 1 stone. Don't make too many dishes. Help your parents. Okay. So, I took my notes on my inventors. John Lee Love. Garrett Morgan, who invented the traffic light, or at least invented a type of traffic light that saved many lives. John L. Lee, who invented the handheld pencil sharpener. I wrote specifically handheld because I know a lot of the sharpeners you guys use are electric. So I wanted to make you really aware that he didn't invent the electric sharpener, but he invented the handheld sharpener. And then Alfred L. Crail, he wasn't mentioned in the text, but he was someone who, when they mentioned that a Black man invented the ice cream scoop, that was him. And then Lonnie Johnson was also not mentioned in the text, but they mentioned that there was a Black man that invented the super soaker, and that was him. There's actually a lot of videos and books on Lonnie Johnson if anyone ever wants to look it up. I know some of my friends in my class were reading about him. So, let me see. Make sure you have time to copy that down. Okay. I'm going to assume you paused. All right, I'm going to go because now I have to eat all of this ice cream before it's all melts. I mean, really? I wonder, you think that's how they made milkshakes happen? Someone ate ice cream one day, it ended up melting, and then they said, you know, can't get good ice cream go to waste. That means ice cream. Who wastes ice cream, right? And then they said, if we put a straw on this and we drink it, it turns into something else, turns into a drink. I don't know. Something to think about. But I appreciate the objects around me a lot more now. I hope you do too. We're going to learn about the surprise ending tomorrow. When I tell you, it blew my mind. Oh, thank God for African American inventors, I'm telling you. All right. See you guys later. Remember, you are excellent, and we don't give up.